Before we get started today, I'd just like to say something. You see this guy right here? He needs to die. He needs to die horribly, he needs to die painfully, he needs to die thoroughly. If not by the end of this game, then by the end of the series. Like, he just needs to die. He needs to die! Okay. Now that I got that out of my system, let's talk about today's game. Today on Ancient DOS Games, we're doing Descent. And Descent is perhaps one of the most influential games ever made. Like, I mean, first of all, it's not your typical first-person shooter, because this game, you're not running on the ground shooting at things. You have full control over where you move in these environments. You can turn in any direction, you can move in any direction, and you don't have to have like constant acceleration like in a flight-based game either. You have total control over your movement. That also means that the levels are designed with this in mind, and can be really confusing to navigate. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves, let's talk about the game stats. Descent was developed by Parallax Software and published by Interplay in 1995. It's a 1 to 8 player flight-based first-person shooter. It supports multiple 256 color graphics modes, though if you want to have the cockpit view, you have to play it at 320 by 200, even though the game does actually go up to 640 by 480. And it supports multiple sound cards, so just pick whichever ones you feel will sound the best. Mostly the music choice is going to be the most important because, you know, general MIDI isn't going to sound the same on everyone's system. So pick whichever one suits your tastes. And as for its release date, it's still commercial, but you can actually find a download of it, of both Descent and Descent 2 together, at GOG.com for just $6. So the story goes that in the future, there's this big corporate conglomerate called the PTMC, or the Post-Terran Minerals Corporation, that has all these mines on the various planets in our solar system, and for some curious reason, all you robots in these mines have started going crazy and attacking everything. The mines have been completely severed from their self-destruct commands, so they can't be destroyed. The robots keep respawning and creating more, and eventually they're going to attack Earth. So you're being brought in to clean up the mines, destroy their reactors, and get out before the reactors incinerate you in the process. Sounds simple enough, right? Well, there's actually 27 of these mines you gotta go through. And that's not counting the secret levels, which adds another 3, so this game actually has 30 levels, and they can be pretty long levels. Like, some of these levels can take half an hour to an hour, because they're so difficult to navigate from having all the different directions you can be facing and flying in. Actually, I probably should address the difficulty just for a moment here. You may have noticed that when I started playing, I was selected the Rookie difficulty. I can't actually play this on Hotshot skill, but the discrepancy in the difficulty levels is pretty crazy. Like, I mean, Trainee is ridiculously easy, and then Rookie is just a bit easy, and then Hotshot is really difficult, and then Ace is nearly impossible, and Insane pretty much is impossible. Though I bet there's someone out there who's able to beat the game on that skill level, but it's not me. But yeah, the difficulty jumps between each skill level. It's not really smooth, so you just gotta pick whichever one you feel plays the best, and for showing gameplay footage, that really is the Rookie skill, because if I play on Hotshot, you're just gonna see me dying every 10 seconds or something. So yeah, this game is a really, really challenging game, but it is actually really fun too. You get a whole bunch of weapons you can use, from primary weapons which drain off your energy or have their own ammo supply, or your secondary weapons which are basically missiles that do lots of damage that you get a limited quantity of. So, you know, just a brief description of the weapons. Your first weapon that you get is the lasers, and they can be upgraded to 4 different levels of power, and at each level they have a different sort of color and a different sound effect, and you can even get a quad laser power up to fire 4 of them at a time instead of just 2. Next would come the Vulcan Cannon, which doesn't use any energy at all, but it has its own internal ammo supply. So actually, the Vulcan Cannon is nice if you have an enemy near some lava, and then you just aim at the lava, and you just cause it to spread all upwards and just take out the enemy. That's always a neat trick. The next weapon is the Spread Fire gun, and Spread Fire actually is the fastest shooting weapon in the game, well, except for the Vulcan, which hits instantly, but the Spread Fire shoots the fastest shots, and it also shoots it in a sort of plus sort of spread pattern. Spread fire is good for taking out lots of enemies that are at long range. The plasma cannon is definitely the most powerful of the general weapons in terms of just ease to use and, you know, ease to aim and stuff like that. The shots from the plasma cannon are kind of big though, so you gotta make sure you get them on your target and not like caught on a wall or something. And then you have the fusion cannon. The fusion cannon is a weapon where you charge it up, shoot the charged blast, and it basically just passes through anything and does tremendous damage. It is also the biggest energy user, so you gotta make sure there's a lot of energy around when you start using the fusion cannon. And aiming it can also be hard because when you're trying to charge it, your ship just starts shaking everywhere, and if you charge it for too long, it overloads, and when it overloads, you start taking damage. Then you have your secondary weapons, and your secondary weapons include concussion missiles, which just blow stuff up. They don't have anything special about them, you just shoot them and they explode. Kind of wish the explosion on the concussion missiles was bigger, but the enemies kind of get them too, so maybe that's a good thing that they don't explode that big. Then you get your homing missiles, which just blow stuff up more easily since they track their targets, perhaps a little too well. You'll find out more about that later. You got your proximity bombs, which are best used to just drop behind you when an enemy's trailing you to try and stop them in their tracks, because they don't do that much damage and they're not really that big a proximity. It's not like you get like within a few feet and they explode. No, you gotta basically touch them before they'll explode. So I don't find they're that useful. The smart missiles, on the other hand, are extremely useful, because what happens with the smart missiles is when it hits a wall, it explodes into a cloud of plasma particles that actually track the targets. So the best thing to do with the smart missile is if you have an enemy around a corner, you shoot the smart missile at the wall that you're facing, and then the little plasma bolts go around that corner there and hit the enemy. So that's the best use for the smart missiles. And lastly, you have the mega missiles. The mega missiles are basically the equivalent of nukes. You shoot them at anything you want dead, and it will die. I guarantee it. And like any good game, you get a bunch of other power-ups too. Like there's a cloaking device, which unlike in terminal velocity, in this game it actually does make you invisible, and the enemies will have no idea where you are unless you fire your weapons, because, you know, your weapons do actually look like stuff. So if you shoot your weapons, the enemies will spot you, but then they'll only really know where you last fired from. So you can actually trick the enemies into firing and facing in one direction and then get around them and shoot them from the back. You just gotta be quick about it. The cloaking device only lasts 30 seconds. And then there's also the Invulnerability, which basically, you know, makes you invulnerable. It's probably one of the most useful power-ups in this game because you can get into situations that are really, really dangerous. So make sure you save the cloaking devices and invincibilities for when you really need them, because if you just waste the 30 seconds you get from them, then you're not really going to get very far. So when you spot them, just look ahead, see what's coming, and if a really tough situation is in your future, then get them. There's also an antiquated extra life system. Extra lives are actually really easy to come by in this game, especially if you're playing on the higher skill levels, because in the higher skill levels you get skill bonuses, and it only takes 50,000 points to get an extra life, so they're actually not hard to get, and you'll probably have lots of extra lives by the end of the game. Unless you're playing on a higher skill level, in which case you'll probably have no extra lives by the end of the game if you even make it that far. In fact, the extra life system is kind of superfluous because you get the ability to save within the level and reload within the level. It's so superfluous that by the time the third Descent game came out, they removed the extra life system and just gave you unlimited lives. Why not? Because the game is really long and because the levels are really difficult to navigate and the enemies are constantly respawning and stuff, I got a few tips to help you not get dead. So let's get the first and obvious one out of the way. Make sure you locate the exit before you blow the reactor. If you blow the reactor and you don't know where the exit is, you're not making it out in time. Locate that exit door, remember where it is, plot your escape route, then destroy the reactor and get out as fast as you can. Next, don't feel like you have to rescue the hostages the moment you see them, because if you get killed in the middle of the level while carrying hostages on board your ship, they kind of go down in flames with the rest of your ship. So locate the hostages, yes, but don't actually rescue them until you've got the level pretty much clear. That way you can actually get them out safely and get the bonuses that you would normally get at the end of the level for rescuing the hostages. Because those bonuses will help add to your score, and your score adds to your extra lives. What's wrong with that? Besides the fact that the extra life system is antiquated. Nextly, when you find the enemy regeneration areas, you know, those purple areas that are all glowy and you see them and you know you gotta stay away from them, those areas aren't actually that big of a difficulty. Like, I mean, they will be for new players who don't understand that they only regenerate robots about 5 times when you trigger them, and then they stop. And it's important to know where that trigger is. So what happens is when you actually find one of those, if it's not already spawning enemies, then you haven't triggered it. When you do suddenly hear it spawn something, you've triggered it. Remember where that trigger is, and try not to activate it again unless you have to, and if you do have to, go straight for that enemy regeneration thing and just blow up 5 enemies from it. And then you'll be good to go, because only 5 will regenerate every time it's triggered. Also, don't be afraid to make liberal use of your secondary weapons. You get a lot of concussion missiles and a lot of homing missiles in this game. Not early in the first and second levels, but later on you get a lot of them. So make good use of them for helping you destroy your enemies. Also, don't be afraid to use the smart missiles or mega missiles either, because they're not as rare as you might think they are. Specifically if you know how to locate the secrets, because all the secret doors in this game generally look like doors. They will have some kind of line running through them or something, and if you shoot a flare to actually light up the area, you'll see those lines and you'll know there's a door there. If the door isn't capable of opening though, chances are there's going to be an enemy behind it waiting to ambush you. In which case, remember where that door is, and when you hear the doors open, go for the enemy, just directly assault it. Don't let it go for you, go for it. And my final tip, which is generally one you want to apply to any first-person shooter, keep moving. Trust me when I say that the enemies in this game, despite how smart they may seem to be, and in fact the AI in the Descent games is actually pretty darn good, the enemies generally tend to fire at the location you were at, and not the location that you're going to. So as long as you stay in constant motion, especially to the sides, then the enemies will have a really hard time hitting you. There's an exception to this though, and it's in particular any enemies that have the Vulcan Cannon as their weapon, because the Vulcan Cannon instantly reaches from where they are to where you are. So when you're dealing with Vulcan Cannon enemies, the best thing to do is to stay as far away from them as possible, and to just shoot them at long range with homing missiles or something. Because you don't want to get in close, because they will just incinerate you. Or not incinerate. What do you call it when you riddle something with bullets? They'll perforate you. They will perforate you full of holes, and a perforated Pyro GX fighter craft is not a happy one. So keep your Pyro GX happy, and don't let it get perforated. Now let's talk about actually getting this game running. The interesting thing is that even though this game does work perfectly fine on the max or auto settings in DOSBox, there's an issue with the homing missiles. You see, the homing missiles in this game have a tendency to be far too accurate on higher end systems. So what you want to do is set a fixed cycles count and intentionally scale down how much processing power this game is getting. Though, even when you do that, you might find that max or auto might just be better to set anyways, because it can sometimes be tricky to find that perfect balance. The setting I use is 80,000. And yeah, 80,000, 80,000. And it might be even a little too high for some people. I prefer that setting because that's kind of close to the speed that I was originally playing the game at, so I'm kind of used to the homing missiles being nearly impossible to dodge. But that's just my feeling. And of course, since this game is 3D, keep the graphics filters off because they don't really do much to make the game look any better. As for the joystick settings though, this is a game where if you don't have a joystick, you're not going to be able to play it to its full potential, because of the fact that you have to keep control of 6 axes of movement. You really do need a joystick to play this game, preferably a joystick with rudder control and a hat. You can have throttle control as well if you really want to, but I don't find it's that helpful. It's better to just use 2 buttons for moving forward and backward instead of a throttle. And it's actually one of the tricky parts here is that when you do use a joystick with this game with DOSBox, first of all, you need to set up the joystick to FCS mode when you set the joystick type in the configurations for DOSBox. Otherwise, you might not get the hat working properly on your joystick, and even if you do get it working, you may still need to map it to keyboard keys using the key mapper in DOSBox. The hat support just doesn't seem to work very well with Descent. I'm not really sure why. And it really does take a lot of tweaking to get the joystick support just right in this game, and you have to calibrate it in the game as well. In fact, I actually recommend that you skip using DOSBox and instead actually download one of the Windows ports. You see, the game's source code has been released for quite some time now, and there's a source port called D2X-XL, which you can get at www.descent2.de, and I actually recommend playing the game with this instead of DOSBox, because you'll get so many more features and so many graphical enhancements. It's just going to be so much easier to set up the joystick too. So that's the way I recommend to play it, but if you want the purest experience, then go for DOSBox. And with that said, this episode of Ancient DOS Games is finished. So stay tuned for episode 8, where I'll be reviewing a tennis game. And you probably need more info than that to go on to make a guess. Okay, I got it. It's a tennis game with golf-like controls. And if you have any idea which game I'm talking about, then you know it's a good one. And even if you don't, just stay tuned and find out.
Self-destruct sequence activated.